I am Eof the swineherd, Eof the favoured one. Was it not I, tending my pigs on that wooded hillside, that was the first to see, the first to run with the news, the first to carry the word that was to bring the Bishop, Ecgwin of Worcester, to that self-same place where he also saw for himself what I had seen. What we saw then brought about such change in this vale that it would never be the same again.
Hello and welcome to Evesham and the Golden Vale. Today we are in the beautiful market garden town of Evesham, whose history dates back to the Bronze Age. On our journey through the Vale, we will explore the history of the town's abbey church, which in its day was amongst the finest in Britain. We will look at the famous Battle of Evesham and the dramatic death of Simon de Montfort, move forwards in time through the Victorian era to modern day Evesham and the 21st century. So now let's take a look at what's in store on our historic journey. We begin our day here at the Almonry Heritage Centre, where we have a team made up of members of the Vale of Evesham Tourism Association, and we've enlisted their help and we have set them quite a challenge. Now they have got just 8 hours to put together the event section of Evesham and the Golden Vale. So guys, can you tell me exactly what it is you have got to do?
We've been photographing and filming all sorts of events both in the town and the villages. A lot of them are river based, of course. We've got our river festival, John Smith's angling competition, but we've had things like the asparagus auction, which is held in the village of Bredfordton, and we're hoping we can get all this together ready for the video.
Wonderful. Well, it all sounds very exciting. Well, all the best. We've got 8 hours. We'll come back to you throughout the day. See you later on. Good luck. So now we turn our attention to Evesham's past and begin our journey with the founding of its fine abbey. Legend has it that in the 8th century, a young swineherd called Eves was tending his pigs on a wooded hillside when he saw a vision of the Virgin Mary. Word spread to Ecgwin, Bishop of Worcester, who came and visited the area and saw the vision for himself. Ecgwin decreed that a church be built on the site, and the town eventually became known as Evesham. Hom in Saxon language signifies a river island on high ground. The Abbey Church of Evesham was built and dedicated to the Virgin Mary, and by the 11th century it had become a major Benedictine foundation. Development of the abbey continued until the 14th century, until in 1540, as part of Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries, the abbey was sold, dismantled and used as a quarry. All Saints' Church and St Lawrence's Church remained. The cloister arch was built between approximately 1298 and 1318. This beautifully carved archway led into the chapter house, a spectacular room with 10 high-sided walls and no central pillar. In its day, it really was quite unique, as it was the largest single-arch building in the whole of Europe. The chapter house had a dual function, as well as being used by the monks for monastery issues and religious issues. It was also used daily by the monks to hear a chapter read from Benedictine rule. Sadly, the arch is all that remains of this fine building today. St Lawrence's Church was situated near the Abbey Church. The monks built it so those citizens living in the west of Evesham could worship there. After the dissolution in 1540, St Lawrence's Church faced financial difficulties. Its parishioners were fewer and poorer than of All Saints. In the 15th and 19th centuries, many unsuccessful attempts at restoration were made. In January 1978, the parish was united with that of All Saints, as it was too costly to maintain independently. It was finally taken over by the redundant Churches Fund, which is now the Churches Preservation Trust. St Lawrence's is open every day, and a service is held annually on St Lawrence's Day. All Saints was built in the late 12th century for people living in the east of Evesham. In the 1870s, extensive restoration took place, which included the total rebuilding of the north side. After the closure of the church, St Lawrence's All Saints became the parish church of Evesham. Built by the north transept of the abbey, standing 110 feet high overlooking the town, is the bell tower, an outstanding example of perpendicular architecture of the period, and one of Evesham's most outstanding buildings. It was built by Abbot Clement Lichfield and completed between 1533 and 1539. Of course, had the abbey still been here, Evesham would have been a totally different place. However, we now turn to the events of the 4th of August 1265 and the famous Battle of Evesham, when for the first time local history touched national history. The battle marked the end of a power struggle between Henry III and his barons. In 1215, King John had made a number of promises in Magna Carta, but neither he nor Henry III kept them. The result of this was that Simon de Montfort and other barons took up arms against King Henry, who was captured at Lewes in 1264. The following year, the king was taken with de Montfort's army to Evesham, where Simon hoped to meet up with his son, Simon Jr., a meeting that the royalist army sought to prevent.
We begin our story on August 2nd, 1265, when de Montfort led his men across the river at Kempsey in Worcester. With him went King Henry, his captive from the Battle of Lewes. They crossed the River Avon at Pershaw, before marching on to Evesham Abbey. Simon's barber, Nicholas, sighted from the Abbey tower what he assumed to be de Montfort banners in the distance. Thinking he would meet his son, Simon set off for Green Hill, and discovered, too late, that the soldiers were, in fact, the royalist army led by Edward, who had defeated Simon Jr. at Kenilworth and stolen his banners in an attempt to deceive the Earl. A raging battle ensued between the king's men and the Montfortians. Eventually, Simon's army was outnumbered, and he was forced to dismount. Simon continued to fight on foot, a broadsword in his hands, before being stabbed from behind and killed. His body was left badly mutilated on the battlefield with other dead and wounded men. His friends later removed his body and carried him into the abbey, where he was interred near the high altar. Many Montfortians died that day. Those who tried to escape were pursued to their death, even in the abbey precinct. The dead and wounded lay everywhere, and the abbey was pillaged by the victors. The events of that day, August the 4th, 1265, prompted one of Evesham's chroniclers to write, "Such was the murder at Evesham, battle it was none." Following the death of Simon, a spring was found near the site, and this became known as the Battle Well. It became a place of pilgrimage, and many miracles of healing were claimed here in the name of Simon. However, the government took measures to suppress these stories, and eventually popular interest faded.
Evesham has been built around the meandering course of the River Avon. This unique location was the centre for many cottage industries, from nail-making workshops to rope-making workshops, basket weavers, and of course the intensive cultivation of fruit and vegetables. By 1835, the town had a well-established chartered borough council. Many local people were employed on the land of the market garden town of Evesham. People came from far and wide to buy the produce for which Evesham is so famous. The markets were always busy. Working on the land was by no means an easy life, but extremely hard work in all weathers. There were very few machines on the farms to do the work of a man. It would take many hours to plough a field by heavy horse, made harder by miserable, inclement weather and during the darker days of winter. It wasn't unusual to find an entire neighbourhood employed on the land. Everybody had a role to play, whether as a milkmaid, stable boy or fruit and vegetable pickers. Work was constant, there was more than plenty to do. And so much so that holidays were unheard of. The only day the workers were granted was Christmas Day and just possibly one or two other Christian festivals. Market day was make or break time for all the hard work that had gone into farming the land. People would have breakfast at 5 a.m, start work at 6 a.m, preparing the produce for market, which always started on time, 10 o'clock Monday morning. It all happened very fast. You placed your goods down and the auction started right away. It wasn't long before everything was sold. On a good day, people would break for lunch at around 12 o'clock. Sometimes folk would bring their sandwiches along with them, wrapped up in a white recycled sheet. After a morning in the town, it was back to work on the land in all weathers. If you were lucky and it started to rain heavily, you got shed money, known locally as should money, which today is called holiday pay. Major landowners lived in the town and managed vast amounts of acres within the Vale. In the latter half of the century, disputes were frequent between growers and buyers as to what the local measure known as a pot really was, because it varied from village to village. Eventually, a local grower named Harvey Hunt solved the dispute. He was the first to organise a fruit and vegetable auction in Evesham, which led to a set price of produce becoming universally accepted. It wasn't until 1850 that the steam engine played an important role in the success of the market garden town of Evesham. The Great Western Railway and Midland Railway distributed consignments from Evesham late in the day to arrive the very next day in places like Birmingham. Despite the increased ease of travel, Evesham remained a close-knit community. Everyone knew everybody and what line of business they were in. However, the development of the railways did begin to attract a great many visitors to the area, all arriving in this beautiful market garden town to breathe in the healthy atmosphere and to soak up the spectacular scenery of the surrounding countryside.